noticed a lot of people lately are sort of perplexed as to what's going on around them, and they need a model for understanding the world as it is right now, what's unfolding in front of us at the moment. And I think I'm going to use a small example that's not complete per se, but it represents a pattern that you can see sort of recurring in these little spaces. Basically, I call this the three great religions. And I do that deliberately. They're following what I would call a religious pattern. And now you may say, well, what the heck's a religious pattern? Well, religions tend to have some base qualities. One base quality is a definition of the highest good or the most important thing, maybe the highest value, whatever it is. They happen to have an identification, right? Not just a name, but a further identification. They usually have a way to signal to you and to have you signal, if you're in them, where you're at with them. Like, oh, I support them. I support them this much, right? I'm a warrior grade, or I'm a supporter grade, whatever it is. And another thing that they have is a sense of purity, right? So how pure you are in your conviction. They have statements of faith, and they have a sense of evil. And they cast all those things about. Now, it may seem strange, right? Because there's a lot of atheists around, or a lot of professed atheists. And it's sort of hard to understand this until you sort of see it unfold. But I think we've seen it unfold, and we're not recognizing it correctly. And the reason why I'm trying to tell you this, or show you this pattern, is to put your mind at ease in terms of giving you some intelligibility as to why things are happening, why things look the way they look, and what's really going on. So you can be a little bit more calm, hopefully, without sort of sending you into a blind panic. Because when we know we don't know what's going on, then we get into a blind panic. So let's dig into this concept of what I mean by three religions. What happens when you have groups with an aim is that they tend to form these patterns that look very much like religions. And if their aim isn't common enough, or if their value structure is too, we'll say, not encompassing, right? Maybe too simple. Maybe they only have one or two values and all the other values are sort of thrown out. And I don't want to go into values now, but I'll definitely go into values at some point. I'll link it here. But all these religions that I see, and I'm only going to go over a few of them. I'm going to go over what I think are the three biggest ones, at least from my perspective. And maybe there are bigger ones, or maybe you have a different perspective, and so you're seeing different ones. But the pattern's the same, and so three should outline the pattern. So one of the religions, we can probably just refer to it as the climate religion. Dun, dun, dun. And the highest value in the climate religion is to protect the earth, right? Everything else is secondary. Extinction Rebellion, don't care if people die, just want to protect the earth. We got to get rid of people so we can save the earth. It's a little weird. It's not completely irrational, but it's pretty strange. That's their highest good, right? That's effectively the thing that they're worshiping. And then, their idea of purity is something like the pure climate, right? The pure nature, pure plants, pure animals, right? No cages, no eating animals, things like that. And of course it varies, because like all religions, they have different mini variations, right? You can think of them as a bunch of crazy Protestants, and they're broken up, and so some of them are vegans, and some of them are just vegetarians, and some of them don't care whether or not you eat meat. They just want fewer people on the planet, and there's little variations, but they basically all have the same highest good. They have the same sort of purity measure. They all have hierarchies, right? And they have their evil, and their evil in the climate religion is a climate change denier. So the minute they call you a climate change denier, that's it. You're stamped. You've got the mark of the beast. And this pattern works pretty well. And they form hierarchies because there's certainly, better and worse people in there. Some of them are supporting them by, I recycle, so I'm a supporter, I'm in. But what about the people who are out in the boats, stopping other boats from harming animals, for example? Well, they're higher in the hierarchy. Or what about the people who are destroying ag farms and stuff? Well, they're higher in the hierarchy. And I don't want to say which is higher than the other, but there's definitely these levels, and they look like the levels of any church, really, or any sort of religious affiliation. And I mean, this is what we see in the church. It's the same pattern. So this pattern's undeniable. And, I've been saying lately a lot around basically that, if you believe you don't have a religion, one will be provided to you without your knowledge or understanding. In other words, you'll play out these patterns, whether you like it or not. They're unavoidable. And I think that's important to know. So I can give you another example. So there's a race religion, and, protecting the race is the highest good. And that's roughly BLM and things like that. They're little splinter groups, right? BLM isn't the same in all the regions. And their idea of purity is the identification by race. And, some race is more pure than another. And these purity standards are just different from the purity standards of the climate people. That's all. And it's not to say they can't overlap, but their big thing, because their highest good is, protecting the race. Their big thing is racial purity. You have to be pure, and the purity, I understand that the purity distinction is not along racial lines. That's the interesting thing, right? So there's a bunch of white people running BLM, or at least there were, and so it's like, well, what are they up to, right? Well, but they're holding up the highest good, which is to protect the race, whichever race it happens to be, and there's nothing that says their religion can't change which race they're protecting at any given time. Fair enough. But that's the highest good, is race. And identity by race is their purity. And then their evil is racism. And they just call you a racist, and bang, mark of the beast. Done. That's where it's at. That's where it's at with them. And that's what they do. And this is the same pattern as the climate religion, really. It's just, what's changing are the aims within these religions, right? If your aim is protect the earth, you're going to end up in a climate religion of some nature. If your aim is protect the race, you're going to end up in a race religion at some point, That identity may change, but once you build that structure, other people will follow. So the minute, and this is something like, if you identify against a thing, you solidify it, right? So if you identify against races that aren't black, the other races sort of come together and say, well, if you can identify as all one people, even though you don't have anything else in common but skin color, then so can we. That's not good. That's not better. Don't play that game. It's a bad game to play. And it really is about what the aim is. And what you're really seeing are, little people getting together in groups, in relatively small groups relative to the population, and being very loud about their religion. And, all the stuff is there, all the same components. So my third example is the safety religion. And, their highest good is that all people must be safe. They have to be safe. And again, nothing says that they can't change what they're saving you from or keeping you safe from. Right now, it's the vaccine. That's the purity, right? And your statement of faith is your vaccine card, right? You've got to prove that you're in the vaccine club, that you're part of the vaccine church. We have a little membership card. We call it a vaccine card. And then people are safe. And, even though vaccines don't make other people safe, they only make you safe. And even though this isn't a vaccine, because it doesn't meet any of the requirements, fair enough. That's their purity. And what's their evil? Anti-vax. It's right in the name. Anti-vax. They're against something. They're evil. Fair enough. I mean, that's their little religion. And they're all scattered religions. You can see this pattern just playing out. It's right there. It's just playing out. It's unavoidable. It's what groups do. Groups will find something, especially if they're denying, say, a better pattern, right? A more concrete pattern, a more encompassing pattern, a better story that follows the same pattern, but maybe with a lot more flexibility and a lot more options and a lot bigger hierarchy for you to participate in, right? These all have limited participation hierarchies, and that's why they act like scattered religions. And they all have these identical structures they all use identity to stand out, right? They're identifying themselves to attract attention and to call out how much better they are than things that aren't them. And fair enough, religions do that, right? They even if they don't overtly come out and say, well, we're better than the other religions, they're acting as if, right? They're like, oh, you should join us, and we want you to join us. And some of them, many of the Christian religions are, well, if you don't join us, that's okay, but we still want you to join, right? It's still a treatment that we want to attract your attention. We want you here. We want and these very much do that, right? The climate people very much want more climate people there, and they're all putting out signals. These three religions, they're all putting out signals. Very loud signals in some cases, right? From a very few people, but they're informing everybody of their desired outcome, right? Why they think it's the most important outcome. They'll spin you a nice story about why climate now, otherwise planet end, or why race, why now's the time to deal with this race problem and erase the past evils, even though that's not a thing that you can do in the world, right? And they're all evangelizing their cause, right? They all have these people out there saying, no, you need to be part of this. And that's what you're seeing on social media, right? Is all this identification and signaling, and it's not noise, right? It's not, except that it's lots of small groups signaling the same most important thing, right? But it's not the same thing. So they're like, no, the most important thing is climate. And these other guys are like, no, the most important thing is race. No, the most important thing is safety. And so you're getting the same type of signal, most important thing, right? But with different content. It's like, oh, wait, which one of these is better? And then how do I identify myself, right? Because maybe identity by race, I can't really play in that religion. But you know what? I can get a shot and then have a card that says I'm part of this other religion, this safety religion. I don't know. Might be better. Or maybe it's just a climate religion and the rest of them just don't matter. So I'm going to go for that. Because that's definitely, without the climate, we're not here. So fair enough. I don't need a card, but I need to do something, right? So that's how they act like religions. And you'll also notice they shame people who won't overtly make a statement of faith. Right? If you don't say you're for BLM, they'll shame you. If you don't take the knee, they'll shame you. If you don't have some symbol, whatever symbol of the week they're doing, I don't know. They'll shame you about that, right? And they'll go after you. Especially, maybe you need to provide financial or volunteer assistance, right? But they'll ask you to prove your allegiance. Is it a card? Is it a knee? Is it an action? Is it recycling? I don't know. Is it protesting a company? Could be anything. And of course, like all organizations, they have hierarchies, and they pretend not to. Right? They're feigning equality. Everybody's always feigning equality, but equality doesn't exist in people. Unless you think evolution is an incorrect observation of the world, which I don't happen to. So I think that this idea that we're equal or could be equal, if we could, we'd destroy evolution. And since I'm rather fond of the evolution thing, I'm going to go with no on that. But I don't think it's your option, thankfully. I still don't give any control over it. I think you do, but not so sure about that. So there's these hierarchies forming, and they all corrupt themselves, right, by redefining terms when the world doesn't fit into the small identity they'd like it to fit into, right? So you can see this happen, right? You can say, well, there's these anti-vaxxers. Well, why don't they just call themselves vaxxers and say, we're vaxxers? Why are they calling somebody else something? And why are they using anti? Because anti is bad. You're against something. That's bad. I agree. Being against something is bad. Unless that thing is bad, in which case, no. And there's a difference between being against something and not being for something. So anti-vaxxers aren't one group. I think I've said this before. Anti-vaxxers are not one group. They all have different reasons. A skeptic, right, a vaccine skeptic, and somebody who's convinced that there's a microchip in it are not the same type of people. They don't live the same lives. They don't have the same socioeconomic status. They don't have anything in common, except that you could, I guess, label them as anti-vaxxers. But they don't have anything else in common. Those terms don't work, right? And the race religion terms don't work, right? When black people are saying, no, BLM is bad, it's hurtful to black people, they have to break racism, right? The definition, and say, no, those black people are also racist against black people. So they're breaking these definitions. They're consuming themselves. And that's a good sign that they're not healthy, right? They're not good things. They're not lasting things in the world. They may be able to last a little while. Anything can last a little while, even the God particle in the big accelerator. But it's not going to last very long. And they have very small identity containers, very simple ways of dividing up the world. That's also a bad sign. You don't want simple ways of dividing up the world. The world's complex. You need complex ways. It gives you more options and more choice, and is also more scary. But that's the price you pay for choice. And that's why you can't have infinite choice, because it's more scary. It's horror. And yeah, these things all follow the same pattern. They all have purity, equity, good, bad, statements of faith. They all have identities, clear identities. They're all messaging, right? They all pretty much actually have the same messaging pattern, because they're all stealing from the same marketing ideas, basically, or science of marketing things. And they all have organizations behind them. They all have organizations supporting them. Those organizations probably don't actually do anything for their cause, other than maybe give them money just to placate them, because they don't, their organizations are trying to find new audiences. And we've run into these problems before, but we run into this problem fairly commonly. So a number of years ago, it was at least 10 years ago, it was probably 15, there was a big study that was done about how many LGBT people do you think there are in the population of the United States? And the findings were interesting. So the findings were that most people thought that the number of gay and LGBT, roughly speaking, people was 25%, which is a whopping. I mean, that's a quarter of the population. That's a huge percentage. The actual number is 7. So if you sort of think there's lots of BLM people out there, no, not really. They're just loud. And we don't know the difference, because we can't know the difference, because we can't track 350 million people or whatever's in the United States. You can't track large crowds. You can track 150 people at best, Dunbar's number, roughly speaking. But you can't track, thousands of people. You can't do it. And when their signal's being boosted, they seem like a lot bigger than they are, but they're not that big. These are mini religions. Even the climate religion that's been around a long time, very few people. Safety religion, very few people. They allowed people, but there's not that many of them. And the race religion, very few people. And it's not divided up on any sensible grounds, right? It's just kind of arbitrary. All three of them are arbitrary. And all three of them have hierarchies. And all three of them will offer you, your purity. And then you can have it. All you have to do is follow whatever purity guideline they have. And they all try to pretend equity, right? In our system, you'll be equitable because all people can contribute positively to the climate. All people can be mindful of race and racial injustice. All people can get a shot, right? There's a lot of equity there. And that's provided in a larger container in a better way. And you'll notice that in all cases of all religions, you're really just submitting. The question is, what are you submitting to? Do you know? Do you understand? Submission is required for you to get identity. Because if there's nothing to submit to, there's nothing to be in relation to. If there's nothing to be in relation to, where are you? Who are you? What are you? I don't know. Maybe by submitting to the climate religion, you've got your climate flag. You know, I think Greenpeace has a little flag thing they carry around. And now you have an identity. But you have to submit to protect the earth, which is the highest good. You have to submit to keeping the earth clean as your purity pledge. You have to make a statement of faith that that's what you believe. And you have your evil, your devil, your Satan, which is the climate change denier. These patterns are there. They're right in front of us. At least we can make sense of them and understand what's going on. And then in that way, and I've sort of talked about this in my models videos, in my playlist for models, we can help people to understand what they're stuck in and how to get out of it, like any good cult, because these miniature religions, and they are miniature, they are not complete. They're just like cults, right? And some of them offer a sense of community and most don't actually. It's fake community, right? They're not living with you. They're not helping you eat every day or anything like that. They're offering you some camaraderie, I would say. And well, that's great, camaraderie. But it's not as good as fellowship. It's not as good as friendship. It's not a really good intimate connection. I'm not saying those things can't arise. They can arise anywhere. But that's not what's being offered by these religions. So that's just something to watch out for, because rather than giving, your energy to them, you could give your energy to my videos, for example. And that's, I think, a much better use of the thing I value the most, which is your time and attention.